Hello guys, welcome to my humble YouTube channel where I bring you fanfiction that will brighten your days. Before we start, a subscribe is greatly appreciated, and don't forget to leave a like and ring the bell icon so you won't miss exciting new fanfiction stories. True God in Another World, Tensura x Tbate, by Tempest_King_20. Chapter 2. Older Brother Duties. Rimuru Pav. It had been 2 years since I was born into this new world, and while nothing particularly exciting had happened during that time, I had been able to observe my younger brother, Art, growing and developing. Recently, he had begun crawling, and it seemed that one of his first priorities was to head straight to the library. However, even more surprising was what I saw him do once he arrived there. I watched as he began to meditate, and it quickly became apparent that he was manipulating the mana within his body. It was almost as if he already knew how to speed up the awakening process, which led me to wonder if he had some innate genius or if there was energy in his world similar to mana. Aside from watching my brother's progress, there hadn't been much else going on in my life. However, I had spent a lot of time learning about this new world and comparing it to my old one. While the living environment and some aspects were similar to what I was used to, it was clear that the people here were much further behind in terms of technological progress. It seemed unlikely that this world would advance in that area without the help of people from other worlds. Despite the lack of excitement in my day-to-day life, I enjoyed spending time with my family. My mother was always talking to us, likely as a way to encourage us to start talking ourselves. I could already speak, but I waited until Art learned how to, not wanting to appear too unusual. Which is why I deliberately delayed awaken so that I could wake up at the same time as Arthur. Our father would also sit and talk to us, telling stories of his adventurous days and the people he had met along the way. His tales ranged from his adventures with his old party to the Beast Glades, and even how he had met our mother in a town called Valden. He told us how Mother had fallen for him at first sight in the Adventurers Guild, although her version of events was quite different to his. Apparently, she had slapped him on the back of his head and accused him of lying. Being with my family always makes me feel calm and happy, especially now that I was living as a child and didn't have any responsibilities like taking care of my people or dealing with annoying kings. It was a feeling that I hadn't experienced as a human, and I cherished it. However, something about my younger brother's behavior had been worrying me. There were times when he seemed sad or lonely, and I couldn't help but wonder if his previous life had been difficult for him. So, once our parents had gone to sleep, I decided to talk to him. "Hey, Art, are you awake?" I asked quietly, as we lay in our shared bed. Arthur Pav. I lay in my bed, staring up at the pitch-black ceiling of our shared room. My mind was cluttered with thoughts of my past life and the present situation that I found myself in. However, Rimuru's voice interrupted my reverie, bringing my focus back to the present moment. "Arthur, are you awake?" His voice was gentle, almost a whisper, but it was enough to draw me out of my thoughts. In fact, Rimuru always struck me as different. He was unlike any other child I had ever met, with his incredible learning speed and his penchant for meditation. Even now, in the middle of the night, I could see him sitting cross-legged on his bed, his eyes closed as he focused on his breathing. I often saw him meditating more than once, but at first, I did not know why he meditated. It was only after reading the books in the library that I discovered that he was trying to speed up the process of awakening the mana core. Although I was reincarnated as well, I found it strange that he knew about it, and I didn't see him read any book on it before. "What?" I replied after noticing him giving me a confused look as I had been staring at him for a while without saying anything. "Well, I wanted to ask you a few questions. Are you reincarnated?" he asked me in a serious tone unfit for a child. I sat up, surprised at the directness of the question. "Yes, and I think you are too," I replied, feeling his penetrating gaze on me, and he nodded. So for my second question, did your world have mana or any other energy?" he asked me. "Yes, we had something called ki in my world, although it is a bit different from mana since ki only exists in the human body." I hesitated for a moment before launching into a long explanation of all the differences between ki and mana, trying to give him as much information as possible. I see," he said, nodding his head slowly as he tried to absorb everything I said. "So, for my last question, can you tell me your story?" he said, his voice softening, laced with a layer of gentleness. "Why do you want that?" I asked him coldly, letting out a bit of killing intent unintentionally, which surprised him for a moment, but he returned to normal and emitted a calming and gentle aura. "Calm down, Arthur. I'm sorry if I reminded you of some painful memories, but sometimes, I see you look so sad and distant at times. It's like you don't think you're supposed to be here, he said as he approached me. How do you know? I asked him, surprised. To my question, he gave me a warm smile before patting my head and saying, I was a king in my past life, and because of that, I had to watch my people well. I needed to know what they lacked and what they needed, especially since I lived for a very long time and dealt with many people. So I can know people if I watch them well, he explained, which put me in a state of shock. After all, I was a king in my previous life. Who would have imagined that I would be reborn, and that my elder brother would also be a reincarnated king? Me too. I told him, trying to wrap my head around the fact that we were not only reincarnated brothers but also both kings. He tilted his head in confusion. I too was a king in my previous life, I said, feeling a sense of kinship with him. Ha ha ha, what a surprise, I didn't expect it. We're not only reincarnated brothers, but we're both also kings. How likely is that? He laughed a little at the thought, and I couldn't help but join him. After all, it was a bizarre coincidence. So, can you tell me about your past life? I asked him, curious to know more. He gave me a smirk and said, how about you tell me your story first, and then I'll tell you mine. Why me first? I asked. Because I asked you first, and because I am the older brother, he added with a playful grin. Okay, I'll tell you my story. And so I launched into a long and intricate tale of my past life, beginning with the abandonment by my parents, the kindness of Headmistress Welbeck and the friendships with Nico and Cecilia. I spoke of the trio's daring escapades robbing the rich to get money for the orphanage, the tragic death of my beloved headmistress, my desire to become king and revenge to her, and my rivalry with Cecilia that culminated in her death in the tournament. I spoke of how, after taking revenge from the country that killed Headmaster Welbeck, I became an empty man without any purpose or feelings, wandering the earth like a lost soul. Throughout my story, Rimuru listened intently without interrupting, occasionally offering me a pat on the back or a gentle stroke on my hair, trying to provide support and comfort in a way that only an older brother could. His presence was calming, and for the first time since my reincarnation, I felt like I had someone who understood me. After a moment, he looked at me with a soft smile, his eyes seeming to understand all the pain that I was feeling. It's not your fault, he said, his voice low and comforting. I know, I replied, although I didn't really feel like I did. No, you don't know, he said, his voice firm but gentle. You must leave the past for the past and focus on the present, on what you have now, not on the painful past, nor on the vague future. He was right. I had been holding onto my past like an anchor, dragging me down with every passing day. I needed to let go, to start fresh, but it was easier said than done. You mean I should forget about the past, and everything I've done? I asked, feeling a pang of guilt in my chest. No, accept it, he said, looking at me with understanding eyes. Accept the past, accept your actions, it's something you did and it's over. Without this past, there would be no present. What you see now is only a reflection of what you did in the past, and what you will do in the future is only a reflection of what you do now. His words struck a chord with me. He was right. I needed to stop dwelling on my past mistakes, and start focusing on what I can do now to make things right. He waited a while for me to absorb what he said, then he continued. Life always gives us Arthur lessons, either we learn from them or we get hurt by them. So learn from your past, avoid your past mistakes, and learn that I will be with you, so if you fall, lean on me. In the end, this is what I have to do as your big brother, he said with a small smile. You're only a few seconds older than me, I teased him, feeling a bit more relaxed. But I'm still older than you, he said with a chuckle, ruffling my hair. But now let's go to sleep before our mother comes. Didn't you forget something? I asked him with an innocent smile that did not reach my eyes. Huh? Would you like a good night kiss from your big brother? He said with a smirk. Absolutely not. You didn't tell me your story, I told him, feeling a bit annoyed at his previous harassment. I guess you're not going to sleep until I tell you, he said to me, and I just nodded. Sigh, this is going to be a long night, my brother sighed, and I just smiled at him, feeling grateful for this moment. As he began to tell me his story, I couldn't help but feel amazed and proud of him. He was the prince of one of the most powerful kingdoms in the world, and he was distinguished by his amazing magic and his sword skills. He had gone through so much and yet was still here, strong and resilient. Wow, I whispered, almost breathless. Your life is so interesting and full of excitement. Amazed at how much excitement he had in his previous life, but also excited that my brother was such a strong person, and from what he said in his story seemed so good to use sword, I couldn't help but shudder at the thought of what would happen in the future. Rimuru Pav, I couldn't help but smile as I looked at my little brother. His chubby cheeks were pulled up into a huge grin, his bright blue eyes glistening as if he had just received a new toy. It was heartwarming to see him so happy, especially after everything we had gone through. I felt a surge of guilt for deceiving him, yet I knew revealing my true story would not be appropriate at present. Therefore I decided to spin a story that was believable but kept my history concealed. Now I guess we should go to sleep. I don't want to get Mommy's wrath, I said, chuckling at the thought of our mother's terrifying anger. She may be an angel most of the time, but the moment she gets angry, she looks like a demon. It always reminded me of Seal, who had the same menacing aura when she was upset. Less than greater than less than Seal-san, I'm just kidding. Okay. Greater than, I said before things escalate. Less than HMPH. Greater than, I chuckled at her pouting expression. Less than, are you frowning now, Seal? Do it again. Greater than. Less than. Greater than, I knew I should stop teasing her, but it was just too fun. I think you're right, Arthur said as I lay down on the bed to get ready for sleep, but Art stopped me. His expression had changed from one of excitement to one of fear and anxiety. Rimuru, do you think they'll accept us? He asked, his voice faltering slightly. He was clearly worried about what would happen if our new family didn't accept him. I'm sure they will accept us. After all, we are their children, I reassured him, trying to ease his worries. You may not know it, but there is such a thing as the cycle of reincarnation. Reincarnation cycle? He tilted his head in confusion at the foreign term. Yes. The cycle of reincarnation is something that every creature goes through upon death. When the soul enters the cycle, the process of purification or wiping occurs first, where all memories are erased and the soul begins a new life. But because there are so many souls, there are sometimes errors that occur. I explained. So you are saying that our memories should have been erased, but because of the many lives, our memories weren't erased? Arthur asked, his eyes showing a glimmer of understanding. Yeah, so we were supposed to be born like their children, but the cycle of reincarnation had some kind of malfunction, I said. I hoped that my explanations would alleviate Arthur's concerns. In truth, however, there was no way that there could be a malfunction in the cycle of reincarnation. After all, I had put Seal in charge of it, and it was impossible for Seal to make a mistake. Less than right, Seal. Greater than, yes, Master. There was someone who tried to revive Arthur in this world, but due to some mistakes, he reached the body of the unborn child. Greater than, Seal responded. So there are people who know how to do that, I thought to myself. But more importantly, will they try to take my brother? Less than, there is a high probability of that, Master. Greater than, Seal answered my unspoken question. Rimuru. After I finished talking to Seal, I saw my brother shaking me and he had a confused and anxious look on his face. Yes, is there something? I said. That's what I have to say. You've been standing still for quite some time, Art said. Looks like I forgot to do the speeding up of thought. I laughed at his observation. No, I was just lost in thought. I'm really tired now. Well, we should sleep. Good night. Art said. Good night, I said, tucking in the covers for both of us. I watched as he closed his eyes and let out a sigh of contentment. It was moments like this that reminded me why I had to protect him at all costs. He was my little brother, and I would do anything to keep him safe. Rimuru. Arthur called out again, making me turn my head towards him. I responded. Thanks, he said, a small smile forming on his lips. I smiled back at him warmly. Don't worry. These are big brother's duties, after all, I said, patting his head gently. Less than good night, Seal. Greater than, good night, Master. Greater than.